Welcome to the deep dive. We are ripping apart a stack of sources today that fundamentally challenge one of the most ingrained beliefs out there.
Mhm.
The idea that hard work, sheer effort automatically equals wealth.
Right.
We're diving into principles that argue wealth is actually a system. It's built through effective decision making, not just intensity.
Yeah, exactly.
Our mission today really is to cut through the noise and figure out why these sources suggest most people never become truly wealthy.
And it's often not about ability, is it?
No, it's not a lack of ability or desire. It seems to be a misunderstanding of the mechanics.
Yeah.
Confusing money with actual wealth or confusing comfortable activity with real progress.
Or effort with effectiveness. That's the big one.
Yes.
That tension is really everything. The core idea we're exploring is that wealth isn't primarily the result of effort. I mean, effort's required, obviously, but
Sure, you have to do something.
right. But success comes from understanding how the world actually operates and then, well,
Right.
aligning your behavior with that reality. Think of it like applied energy, but applied effectively, using leverage.
Okay, let's unpack this because it really does feel counterintuitive. We look at successful people and we often see the hustle, right? The long hours.
We do.
So if working harder isn't the sole key, what is? This foundational shift seems to be moving from rewarding the input, the sweat, to rewarding the outcome.
Precisely. Money, fundamentally, it flows toward created value. And value is strictly a function of usefulness, not just being busy.
Hmm. That's kind of a hard truth, isn't it?
It is. It's one many of us might avoid. But look, consider the contrast. You've got someone working, say, 80 hours a week,
Hmm.
just grinding away on tasks that, well, they just can't scale beyond their own personal input.
Right. They hit a ceiling, they burn out, maybe struggle financially despite all that effort.
Exactly. And then on the other hand,
You have someone who spends maybe, 10 hours designing a simple piece of software or figuring out an optimized system or maybe creating a product that solves a real problem for thousands of people.
that's the critical difference. That system designer, they can generate continuous compounding wealth, often while they're sleeping, frankly. They chose leverage over just pure labor.
So the economy isn't grading us on how much time we spend sitting at a desk.
No, definitely not. It's grading us on the impact, the scalability of the solution we provide.
That idea, the 80-hour grinder, it really hits home. I think, well, probably all of us confuse busyness with progress sometimes.
Easy to do.
How do we actually diagnose if our effort is scalable or if we're just spinning our wheels?
Yeah, that's where systems thinking really comes into play. To diagnose that scalability, you have to look at your life and your work not just as like a series of isolated tasks,
Mm-hmm.
but as a system. Think of it maybe like a manufacturing plant. If production is low, you don't just yell at the worker on the line to move faster, right?
No, you'd look at the whole process.
Exactly. You step back, you analyze, you maybe redesign the assembly line itself. The system rewards those who optimize that assembly line, those who solve problems more effectively than anyone else.
Okay, so that brings us right to the steering wheel of this whole thing. Decision making. If effectiveness is the goal, then it all rests on whether we're just reacting short term or actually thinking long term cause and effect.
That is it. The ability to logically connect what you're doing now to the future consequences, and crucially, setting aside those emotional impulses. That's the clearest differentiator we see in wealth builders.
Because most people are kind of stuck reacting.
They're stuck in a loop, yeah.
Yeah.
Short-term fixes because they're reactive, not strategic.
Okay, I get the theory, don't just trade time for money indefinitely. But isn't that a bit idealistic sometimes? I mean, if I've got rent due next month, raw effort might be all I feel I have immediate access to. How do you bridge that gap?
That's a really essential, practical question. And the sources use that classic example, the high-paying job that just consumes all your time and energy.
The golden handcuffs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It looks like a financial win today, right now. But the crucial flaw, the hidden trap, is that if that job eats up all your mental and physical bandwidth,
Mm.
it destroys your ability to build optionality, that future freedom to choose what comes next. You get the short-term cash, sure, but you lose the very time you need to design your exit strategy.
So the system view isn't just about making money today. It's about making decisions that actively create future freedom.
Precisely. Every single decision is an input into the system of your life. So you have to ask, what consistent inputs, financial, skill building, relationships, whatever you're making, and what compounding outcomes are they actually producing?
Because time isn't neutral in this.
Not at all. Every choice moves you closer to freedom, or deeper into dependence. Think about it. If your money constantly goes towards liabilities, things that depreciate or cost you more, just for a temporary boost.
Like maybe a fancy car payment you can barely afford.
Right. You're compounding dependence. But if that same money is consistently directed towards assets, things that generate cash flow or appreciate in value,
Like investing or building a side business.
then you're compounding freedom. But compounding only works if the direction is consistent and, importantly, correct.
That long-term view, though, it demands patience.
Yeah.
And that patience gets tested, right? Especially when we inevitably make the wrong call, hit a setback.
That's the transition point, isn't it?
Mm.
If we want to refine that decision system, we have to learn how to treat failure, not as like a personal indictment,
Yeah, not I'm a failure.
right, but as objective data,
Mm.
pure information.
Okay, let's talk about that because the sources have this really powerful, simple formula. Pain plus reflection equals progress.
Yes, it's fundamental. Pain is just a signal. That's all it is. It's telling you there was a gap between what you thought would happen, your assumption about reality, and what actually happened. The tragedy is, when most people feel that signal, that pain, their instinct is to avoid it. They blame the market, they blame their boss, the timing was wrong,
Yeah.
whatever.
They skip the reflection step.
They skip it entirely. And if you skip reflection, you don't just stand still. You actually compound the failure because you're doomed to repeat the same kind of mistake, maybe just with different details next time.
That makes sense.
The people who build wealth, they treat failure like diagnostic data, like finding the black box from a plane crash. They run a quick, honest post-mortem, figure out why it crashed, instead of just, screaming at the sky.
So reflection needs structure. It's not just feeling bad about it.
No, absolutely not. It has to be structured. Analyze the root cause, identify the specific wrong assumption you were operating under, and then this is key. Adjust the underlying principle or rule in your system so that specific mistake doesn't happen again.
Okay, let's use that poor investment decision example again. If I lose money.
Right. The useful response isn't just, oh, the market tanked or I got unlucky.
Yeah.
It's analyzing your own process. What principle was I actually following? Was it based on solid analysis, proven history? Or was I just reacting emotionally? Maybe FOMO, fear of missing out.
Chasing hype.
Chasing hype, exactly. By documenting that, analyzing the process honestly, you start building this personal library of cause and effect. That's how you metabolize failure quickly. You extract the lesson, you adjust the system, and you move forward without all the emotional baggage.
Intellectual humility, then. Being willing to admit you were wrong and learn.
That's the fuel for the learning system. Absolutely.
Okay, so that brings the focus back around to value creation. We need these learning systems, yes, but systems designed to solve what? How do we identify a valuable problem, one that lets us move beyond just trading hours for dollars?
Well, the money flows to consistent usefulness. That's the core idea.
Mm-hmm.
It means solving problems for people, meeting genuine needs, or making something significantly more efficient or scalable or accessible.
And crucially, usefulness is judged by the market, right? Not by how hard we think we tried.
Exactly. The market is completely indifferent to your intentions or your effort level. It only cares about the result. Does this thing you created actually solve a problem or meet a need effectively?
So the questions we should be asking ourselves need to shift, not just what job pays the most.
Right, that's the limiting question.
It should be more like, what valuable problem can I realistically solve? And maybe, how can I build a system that delivers that solution over the long term, separating my personal time from the delivery?
That kind of thinking immediately forces you to consider leverage. Leverage is the concept that lets a small input, time, energy, capital, produce a disproportionately large output.
It's the multiplier.
It's the multiplier. It's what separates linear income, which is always capped by the 24 hours in your day, from potentially exponential wealth.
And we need to understand the forms of leverage. The sources mention a few key ones. Technology seems like the game changer in the modern era, right? It just blows that old time for money model apart.
It absolutely does. Technology is probably the closest thing we have to magic in business. Why? Because it offers near zero marginal cost of replication and distribution.
Meaning once you create it once.
Once you write that piece of code, record that online course, design that automated system, you can replicate it and deliver it to thousands, even millions, essentially infinitely, without a proportional increase in your personal time or effort.
That's incredibly powerful.
That's why it's such a massive wealth creation tool today.
Okay, so Beyond tech, we also have capital, which is simply money working for you, making more money.
Right. Investments, assets generating returns.
And then systems themselves.
Systems provide consistency, structure. It's the blueprint for the factory, ensuring predictable results even when you're not physically there overseeing every step.
And finally, people. Leverage through other people's skills.
Yes, delegation, hiring expertise, building a team. It allows you to focus your limited, precious time on the highest leverage activities you can perform. But the goal with all forms of leverage is always the same.
Increase the output without proportionally increasing your personal input.
Exactly. Separate your time from the income generation.
And using that leverage effectively, it seems like it requires a fundamental shift in how you see your role and an identity shift.
It really does. You have to consciously move from being the operator, the person who is the engine of production, the one who has to be there doing the thing.
The indispensable cog in the machine.
Right. You have to move from that to being the architect, the designer of the entire system. The architect's upfront effort is intense, yes, but it's focused on thinking, planning, designing, testing,
Building the machine itself.
building the machine that should, ideally, function without their constant hands-on linear oversight.
Hmm?
That fundamental difference in role operator versus architect, that's the chasm between just grinding out a living and actually building sustainable wealth.
Okay, so let's try to quickly bring this deep dive together. The key takeaways seem to be wealth requires clarity over just raw intensity. It needs that long-term systemic perspective that respects compounding. It demands treating pain and failure not as emotional events, but as objective data for improvement.
Crucial.
And finally, actively seeking and utilizing leverage, capital, tech, systems, people to scale the value you create far beyond your personal time limits.
That's a great synthesis. Improving your decision-making quality and actively building those feedback loops, that pain plus reflection loop that becomes the steering wheel for your financial life.
Not just reacting to the bumps in the road.
No, you need to stop just hoping your strategy works out. You need to start objectively treating your life, your career, your finances like a machine. A machine that can be studied, analyzed, adjusted, and improved based on real data and, importantly, intellectual humility. You have to actively work to remove the randomness.
That is such a profound shift, isn't it? From that reactive mode most people seem to default to.
It is.
You're moving from constantly playing defense against financial stress to strategically building an offensive system designed for success.
And the sources strongly suggest that thinking like a designer, like an architect of systems, that's what removes the randomness. It moves you from being just a reactive hustler to becoming a strategic builder. The upfront cost is definitely intellectual discipline, maybe some discomfort,
Facing those failures.
facing the failures, doing the reflection, but the long-term payoff is genuine freedom, financial freedom, time freedom.
So here's the provocative thought we want to leave you with today, building on everything we've discussed. Ask yourself this honestly. Are you currently treating your efforts and your decisions mostly as one-off events, relying purely on hustle and hoping for the best? Or are you consciously, actively building and refining a consistent, leveraged system, a system that is actually engineered for predictable, compounding success? Think about your own personal operating system, and maybe identify where you need to start redesigning that assembly line.